Hi, I'm Michael Reese. I'm sitting here today with Phil Bannon. He is both a CPA, Certified Public Accountant, and a CFP, Certified Financial Planning Professional. And Phil, you always like to make fun that you've had your CFP like 2 or 3 days before me, right?
Maybe a few months.
A few months, yeah. So he likes to always rub that in. So anyway, today we're talking about taxes. And when it comes to your taxes, there are really two types of things you need to think about. There's what's called tax preparation. That's where you're filling out the tax return. And then tax planning. And tax planning is where you're figuring out how you're going to influence those tax returns in the future. Today is all about drilling down on the tax preparation, filling out the return. And we're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of doing it yourself versus hiring a professional. So Phil, let's start with people who like to do it themselves. Maybe they're buying TurboTax or TaxCut or something like that. They're doing it online, I'm sure. Give me like 3 reasons that someone would want to do their own tax return.
Well, 3 reasons, mainly from a cost standpoint, convenience standpoint, and some people just enjoy crunching the numbers.
So cost, let's dial on that one. So from a cost perspective, like you can buy, I'm guessing TurboCheap or TaxCut relatively cheaply each year, is that correct?
Yeah, you can buy the software relatively cheaply. It's going to vary on your circumstances. If you have rental property or K-1s, you're going to be buying a more expensive program.
Yeah.
Now you have to pay for filing fees. If you have state returns, you have to pay for state returns. So those costs can add up quickly. But if your return's simple, straightforward, then from a cost standpoint, that may make sense.
Yeah, and I can imagine always better to pay less if you can. And I'm sure on the convenience side, you're referencing what? That people can pretty much, if they do it themselves, they can pretty much do it on their calendar, whatever works for them?
Yeah, they could do it, say on their weekend, their free time. They don't have to send their documents in. So it may be a little bit more convenient.
Got it. And then the third one you said was they like working the numbers themselves. They like doing it themselves. Expand on that a little bit.
Well, especially for the people who, they have a finance background or, maybe they have a tax or accounting background. They like digging into the numbers and they like doing that themselves. Although we get a number of people who they do that for 1 year and then they come and they say, Phil, I'm pulling my hair out, please do it. So.
Yeah, I hear you. So some people probably do enjoy, I imagine, the ability, if you do it yourself, you have a sense of accomplishment, like, wow, I did that. And you can feel good about yourself, right?
Right.
Okay, Phil, let's talk a little bit about some of the cons of doing it yourself. And again, you gave me a list of 3 of them here. What are those again?
Well, I think the complexity, can be also very time consuming. And then, we also see where people miss a lot of deductions.
There you go. So complexity, time, missed deductions. So let's dive into each of those a little bit. So tell me a little bit about when you say complexity. I'm sure you're not referencing how the tax code is complicated, right?
Yes. Well, the tax code, it's changing every year and it's hard to keep up with those changes. And it overwhelms people. They're still thinking, well, 5 years ago I was able to deduct that, but now I can't. So
yeah, the rules are changing. It's very complex. I remember one of my good friends used to say, you don't know what you don't know when it comes to the tax code. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
That's a big one, huh?
Yeah.
And then you said time. So how is doing your own tax preparation time consuming? I thought TurboTax made it super easy. It should take like 2 minutes.
Well, no, people a lot of times end up pulling their hair out and they're calling, asking questions and, hey, you're retired, this is time to not have stress in your life and take it easy. Do you want to spend your weekends doing taxes or maybe out on the golf course?
Yeah, I hear you. It's one of those things of it seems like it should be kind of easy, but unless you have a background, might not be, and so it takes more time than you thought it would, right?
Right.
And then our last one, you said that missed deductions. Do you ever come across people that do their own tax return and then they bring it into you to review it and you see, oh my gosh, what about this? What about that? Does that ever happen?
Oh yeah, every year, there's people who I'll review their prior year return, and there's some sort of missed deduction. One example is that people have rental property.
Mm-hmm.
We had a client who brought their return in and they failed to take depreciation on that rental property. And the IRS, doesn't look, they kind of frown on that. They, if you miss that, then they're kind of like, too bad, you missed it,
Yeah, it's on you, right?
Right.
You're saying the IRS doesn't really have a heart.
Right.
as we probably all knew. So there you go. So let's do a quick wrap up. I've got some notes here so I don't lose track. So Phil, you were telling us that when it comes to doing your own taxes, some of the benefits are cost savings, right? It's convenient, and there's some enjoyment out of a sense of accomplishment of doing it yourself, and maybe you like playing around with all the numbers. On the other side, the cons are, the tax law is always changing, so there's some complexity going on there. Time consuming, takes time. And then third, there could be some missed deductions. In fact, something you see all the time. Did I get those right?
Yeah, that's a good summary.
Pretty good?
Right.
See that? This is what notes are for, folks. All right, let's go ahead and transition. Now let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of maybe hiring a professional like a CPA to do your tax return. So Phil, let's start with the pros, right? Again, let's hit the top three that you gave me a list. Fill me in, what are they?
Well, kind of the opposite of the cons. The tax code's very complex, so that's our job to, figure that out for you. And the second, it's very efficient. So you're on the golf course, we're doing that for you. And, we understand the tax code, so we're making sure that we maximize all your deductions for you.
Got it. So let's dive into each of those real quickly. So we talked about kind of the opposite of the cons when you do it yourself. First con was complexity. The tax code's very complicated. So it's your job to stay on top of all the rule changes, right?
Right.
Do you ever have to go to classes during the year or some type of training throughout the year to make sure you're staying on top of that?
Yeah, we make sure, go to refresher classes, and we keep up on it and keep up on, Congress is always proposing different laws. So we keep up on that and make sure, as soon as those do become law, which we'll probably see quite a bit of, the end of this year, next year.
Isn't that crazy? They propose a lot of laws, but how many of them actually end up being passed? And then I know the other thing you're telling me about is that sometimes the IRS even says, hey, we're going to change the rules, like on inherited IRAs, for example. We're going to make a rule, we're going to make it very vague, and then we're going to change the rules as we go, but it's never really published anywhere. You just kind of have to go with it, right?
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. So we keep up on that. We keep up on all the changes, and we get that information out to our clients.
Yeah, super important, because these are the kinds of things, one little mistake can cost a ridiculous amount of money and penalties and all that stuff. And then you said time efficient. So we said when you do it yourself, there might be a time element going on. But when you're doing the return, hey, I'm thinking if I give you my return to do, I can go out golfing, Becky can go play tennis, we can go out to dinner, right? We don't have that problem on our laps anymore. Now you get to deal with it.
Right, we try to make our process as efficient as possible. So really just upload your documents to us, ask questions online, and we do all the hard work for you.
Yeah, so we can give you our info and then get the heck out of the way, right?
Right.
There you go. And then the last one had to do with deductions, right? Sometimes when you're doing it yourself, you don't even know what to ask. You miss some deductions. And one of the benefits of working with a CPA to have you do the tax return means that the odds of maximizing the deductions that you're due are enhanced, correct?
Right. Yeah. We see people miss a lot of deductions, but we make sure, we're going to get you the best return by maximizing your deductions.
Right. You do your best. So here we go. That means expertise, knowing the tax law, right? Being time efficient, and then making sure everybody gets their deductions. All right. Now, as you can imagine, we also have some cons or disadvantages from working directly with a tax professional like a certified public accountant. So Phil, give me the top 3 reasons someone might not want to work with a CPA.
I'd say maybe the top 3 reasons might be cost, might be dependency on someone else, and maybe you're working on someone else's schedule.
Okay, those are 3 good ones. So let's start with the first one, cost. This is probably the big one, right? People are like, oh, why am I going to pay a whole bunch of money for a CPA when I could do it myself on TurboTax cheaper, right? And I get the same outcome. The reality is you don't always get the same outcome though, do you?
No, you don't. And we keep our costs very low. The cost of software now, filing fees. We offer tax protection, which is an extra cost for TurboTax. So, really from a cost standpoint, yeah, you might be able to do it a little bit cheaper on your own, but, not really.
Well, the deal is you might do it a little cheaper, but here's the thing. In the back of your mind, you're probably always wondering, oh, am I missing those deductions? What am I missing? I don't know what I don't know. The tax code's so complicated. So yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit more to pay a CPA, probably. A lot of times it's well worth the price though.
Right.
Now, the second one you said dependency, and I think what you're talking about there is, some people, they like being in control of all their numbers and all their situation, but by working with someone like yourself, they're kind of giving that up, aren't they?
Right. Yeah, some people, our system, we try to make, very efficient, where you upload your documents, ask any questions, but you're still, it's on our time schedule, so to speak. It's not, we do a lot of returns. So, it's really it's not on your schedule. If you want to get it out this weekend, that may or may not happen.
Yeah, so you lose some of that control, right? And then that really brings up the third one too, is when you talk about that scheduling, you're talking about it's no longer on your terms, now it's on the CPA's terms, right? Because like you said, you've got a lot of returns that you're processing, and so you're kind of working your way through them. And if you want your return done this weekend, is that really going to happen? Probably not. It's going to happen whenever your schedule kind of allows for it, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And then the other problem, here's another issue that comes up that I know of. I remember you were telling me that, we were talking about this. You said, Mike, it used to be that I'd get all of the 1099s by the end of January, right? So it gave you all of February, all of March, and half of April, or 2.5 months to get all the returns done. When do you see all the 1099s these days?
Well, we get 1099s, flows into February, flows into March.
Yeah, it's like, I was TD Ameritrade, which is now Schwab. I got a notice, they said, yeah, we'll have it near the end of February. Well, guess what? If all these 1099s are not delivered till the end of February, suddenly, how much time do you have to do all those returns? You've got basically March and you got like 6 weeks, right? And as a result, what are we seeing more and more? We're seeing people saying, you know what? Let's just go ahead and extend. And extending your return means what?
Well, you can extend your return. You get an extra 6 months before you have to actually file that return. But a lot of the times people forget that tax is still due April 15th.
Yeah, that's right. So, at running a business, I'm used to extending my return. I think that CPAs just assume if you're running a business, you want to extend your return, whether you want to or not. But for individuals, we're seeing more and more individuals extending now because of some of these time crunches, and they're just waiting on documents to come in like K1s and such, right?
Yeah, definitely. If you have a K1, a lot of times you're not going to get that K1 until the summer. So that's, almost a definite extension.
Right.
And even with the 1099s, those may come out in February, March, but then especially the past few years, a lot of the custodians, have sent out corrected 1099s. So, you may get that late March, April, which would cause an extension.
Yeah, then you got to extend. So some of the cons here, there's expenses. They're depending on you and your calendar and just scheduling. It could take longer because of a host of issues. And, which always cracks me up, right? You would think that, aren't we supposed to be in the age of computers where shouldn't we have this data like right away? Why is it taking longer? It should take a shorter period of time to get data, I would imagine, wouldn't you?
Right.
I mean, my QuickBooks are all done by the end of the year. Why can't everyone's be? So anyway, there you go, folks. So there's our pros and cons of having a professional do your tax return. So the pros are, and let me make sure I get my notes right here. Gotta get this good. Expertise, right? The tax code's complicated. A professional can help keep track. They're very time efficient. Once you upload your docs, you're done. Let them deal with it. And then, of course, maximizing all the deductions that you're due. On the disadvantage side, there's oftentimes costs a little bit more money. You're depending on their calendar, of course, and just from a scheduling perspective, a time perspective, it may take a little bit longer to get your returns done. So whether you do it yourself or not, there's pros and cons each way. The key is this. Remember, the tax code is complicated. It changes every year, all the time, some years even more than others. And when you do it yourself, you're taking on the risk that you're going to miss something because of all these changing rules. And if you miss something, it could cost you in potential deductions, or maybe you do something wrong and it costs you penalties. On the other hand, hiring a professional can help you avoid all of that, but it might cost a little bit more money. Hope this was helpful. Phil, thanks so much for joining us today. This is real helpful, I thought.
Oh, thank you.
And don't forget, remember, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that like button. That way you won't miss out on all of our great content.